Patrick Mahomes has played 10 career playoff games. He's averaged over 310 passing yards in those 10 career playoff games. His 2 playoff games this season, he's averaging 391 yards. 391.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into Monkey Knife Fights Championship Sunday Preview. I'm Dan Watkins. We have a very special guest joining us this week, the legendary Matthew Berry of ESPN. Matthew, how's it going, man?
Very good, man. Come on, we got a couple of championship games. We got 4 teams left. We got 3 games left. I'm ready. I'm ready.
Right. I mean, if this Sunday is even half as good as last weekend, we're in for a real treat. Because I mean, we just got like the greatest weekend of football ever. So the follow-up's going to be a little tough, but I think these guys can live up to the hype here.
I'm excited. I'm excited about the games. No question about it. It'll be really fun to see how it all plays out.
So before we get into our fantasy stuff here, let's do a little big picture. What is the biggest storyline for you heading into this weekend?
The biggest storyline,
whether it's fantasy or real football, either one.
I mean, I think the biggest storyline is probably got to be the Rams. You know, sorry, my kids. You know, I was telling the guys before we got on air that you know, I got a bunch of kids at home today. So okay. So at any rate, I think it's the Rams. Honestly, for me, I think it's the Rams. They're going to be playing this game in their home stadium. They have a chance to play in their home stadium in the Super Bowl. You know, could they be the second team to win a Super Bowl in their home stadium back to back? Obviously, the Buccaneers did it last year in Tampa Bay. So I think that, especially with, you know, Matthew Stafford and the struggles he's had traditionally, you know, and so like his first playoff win was last week. And so I think that's sort of interesting. Sean McVay has kind of come under criticism. You know, obviously he lost his Super Bowl to Bill Belichick, and there have been concerns like, you know, does he always get outcoached by Kyle Shanahan? Obviously, the Rams have struggled against the 49ers. So I honestly think the Rams are the most intriguing team, especially when you think about what the Rams did this year, where they clearly, you know, they traded the picks for Matthew Stafford. They traded the picks for Beckham. They traded the picks for Von Miller. Like, the Rams are as all in as any team gets. And so when you see a team push all their chips to the middle for 1 year, the way that the Rams did this year, and now they're a game away from the Super Bowl at home against their division rivals, to me, I think that's the storyline.
Yeah, it's crazy how we went, you know, 54 years or whatever without a team playing in their home stadium for a Super Bowl. Now we might have it in back-to-back years. Just crazy how that works. But I completely agree with you that it's the Rams. I mean, they've lost 6 in a row to the 49ers, and they've, as you mentioned, they pushed all their chips into the middle here. It's just another way, you know, of building a team and getting to the mountaintop, whether, you know, you have all these other teams like the Bengals and the Chiefs that built through the draft. And now you have the Rams that are doing a completely different way and just saying, nope, screw the draft. We're just going to go all in and get these stars and just be fully Los Angeles about this. So
I mean, I think if you're a network television executive, you're sitting here going like, all right, well, we could have the 49ers and the Bengals, or we could have, you know, a rematch, Chiefs Niners. We could have a rematch of a Super Bowl from a few years ago, or potentially we could have the Rams against the Chiefs, which I think is, my guess is, if I were NBC, which is broadcasting the Super Bowl, like that's what I would want. That seems like the quote, the sexiest matchup, if you will, obviously. So really interesting to see how it plays out. But 4 great teams, 4 great stories this year, all the way around, and excited to see how it all plays out.
So we just mentioned the Rams there. Who on the other side of this, who do you think has the most to gain this weekend? For me, I think it's Jimmy Garoppolo. I think he's playing for a contract somewhere else next season.
I agree with you on Garoppolo, right? I mean, I think there's you could argue McVay. You could argue Sean McVay and Les Snead, right? I mean, again, as we've talked about, they have most to gain. Like they've really kind of gone all in here. And so if it works, right? I mean, like they look like geniuses, right? You know, so right. They certainly have a lot to gain. They have a lot to gain. I would argue, I mean, you know, everyone does, right? I mean, like if the Bengals, I mean, you know, from worst to first in 3 years would be unbelievable. You know, Joe Burrow, obviously, and Zach Taylor, tremendous. They would have a lot to cement themselves. And I think Andy Reid as well, right? Andy Reid, as great a coach as he is, he's got one Super Bowl title. There was talk earlier this year that had the league figured out Andy Reid, had the league figured out Patrick Mahomes. But Patrick Mahomes, how old is Patrick Mahomes? 25, 26?
Right,
something like that?
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
He had 2 Super Bowl rings by 26. Like, I mean,
yeah.
So I think he has the most to gain.
Yeah,
and they all do. I'm just saying that I would argue Garoppolo is the correct answer, but there are a lot of potential winners this weekend.
Yeah, I saw your partner from ESPN Fantasy, Field Yates, put out a tweet yesterday about Burrow, that he's the first quarterback ever drafted #1 overall and then starting Championship Sunday the year after. Just a complete turnaround in Cincinnati. It's just so crazy to think that the Bengals are good now. It's just crazy.
Well, especially because, by the way, no one and I'll raise my hand. I was among the people that said, I get it with Jamar Chase, but that offensive line is so brutal. You got to draft Penei Sewell. They didn't. And it's obviously worked out for him. To me, the biggest surprise is I think we all thought the offense would be good, but how good that defense has played. Right. Because last year they were brutal as a defense. And, prior to his injury, Joe Burrow led the NFL in pass attempts per game. And that's because they had to, because they were constantly down and they were down big. So it's an incredible turnaround. And I'm on a personal level, this has been a long time, a joke of my podcast where I always say, I always feel so bad for Bengals fans because I feel like every time you count on the Bengals, they bone you, and that's been a long running joke on the pod. And so I'm just thrilled after struggling for the last few years. And then prior to that, all those first round exits in the playoffs under Marvin Lewis and Andy Dalton,
Yep.
long suffering crew of fans. So I'm excited I'm excited for the Bengals fans.
Absolutely. So before we get into these games here, I understand you have a great fantasy newsletter. I was checking it out beforehand. It's more than just fantasy. It's a little bit of everything. Could you tell us about it?
It's called the Fantasy Life Newsletter. Peter Overzet writes it every single day, comes into your inbox. It's 100% free. We have a number of contributors as well that help contribute to the newsletter. But again, it's all overseen and written by Peter. All credit to him. I always say, you guys should subscribe to it. What do you like? You don't like it? Unsubscribe. It's a free newsletter. What do you care? But try it out. But, people really love it. Peter does a great job of it. And it's just basically everything you need to know for fantasy football for that day. It's a quick read. It's funny. It's written well. So it's not only informative, but it's also smart and funny. And you can go to fantasylife.com and click on newsletter to sign up for free.
Yeah, it's kind of like your perfect Twitter news feed of just fantasy football stuff. It's just everything that you need to know is just right there. I was really enjoying reading the past couple of this week.
And we always find tweets that you may have missed in terms of analysis from people that maybe you don't follow yet, or you don't want to see on Twitter. And so it's been the newsletter has been great. And Monkey Knife Fight is one of the sponsors of the newsletter. They've been a great partner of ours. We're thrilled to have them along. It's been really great having them, and our readers have responded to some of the offers that Monkey Knife Fight have put out there. So, by the way, if you're watching this, you're a Monkey Knife Fight fan, you should check out the newsletter because there's some good Monkey Knife Fight deals and promotions that go on as well.
And I think that's a perfect jumping off point to get right into these contests that we have here on MKF this weekend. Let's start with the AFC Championship game at 3:00 kickoff on Sunday. And we got the Bengals at the Chiefs. Joe Burrow, 290.5 passing yards is his more or less prop on MKF. He's thrown for 291 yards or more in 7 of 18 games this season, but he's reached it in 5 of the last 7 weeks. So he's really turned it on here, Matthew. He's coming off a 348-yard performance against the Titans last week, and he threw for a monster total 446 against KC just about a month ago at home for Cincinnati. So what do you feel about Burrow this weekend?
Yeah, I would say more here. To your point, 5 of the last 7 games, including the playoffs, 300 yards. Week 17 against these same Chiefs, he had 446 passing yards. I don't expect them to be able to run. I'm sure they're going to want to try to run the ball here. But as we get to Joe Mixon, you'll see, I don't think they're going to be able to. So, I would say more than 290 yards for Joe Burrow in this one. I think they're going to have to throw to keep up with Kansas City. Does
the Honey Badger status impact this at all for you, whether he's in or out? I mean, it looks like the reports out of KC right now, it seems like he's going to play. But does he impact this for you?
No, I mean, look, I'm taking the over, right? I'm saying more. So my expectation here is that regardless of, look, if he's not there, that's a good for Joe Burrow. But even if he plays, my expectation here is that they're gonna have to throw quite a bit because I do think Kansas City is going to be successful at moving the ball through the air as well. I think it's a high scoring game.
All right. And then on the other side, you got Patrick Mahomes, 295.5 more or less. He's thrown for 296 or more yards in just 6 of 19 games this season, but he's been over 375 through the year in both playoff games. After a tough year for Mahomes, especially the first half where his interception numbers were just way up compared to what we've seen in the past, it feels like these past couple of weeks, he's kind of reminding everybody that he's still the man, he's still the king, the best quarterback in football. So how do you feel about Patrick Mahomes? Cincinnati did hold him to 259 yards a month ago.
They did, but that's been true for, if you look at the numbers in the regular season, right? You're right. Patrick Mahomes had 17 regular season games this year. He was under 280 passing yards in 12 of them. So I'm with you. But to your point, it does feel like they've kicked it up another level. Playoff Andy Reid is pretty good, right? Patrick Mahomes has played 10 career playoff games. He's averaged over 310 passing yards in those 10 career playoff games. His 2 playoff games this season, he's averaging 391 yards, 391. Now, I know he had the extra period, against Buffalo last Sunday, but still, I guess my belief is, especially because I think that while Jerick McKinnon's been a nice story, the running game has been inconsistent for Kansas City. My belief is the way they move the ball in this one is also through the air. So I'm going to say more than 295 passing yards for Patrick Mahomes.
I agree with you there completely. Let's get into some of these skill guys here. Joe Mixon, who we just mentioned, 60.5 rushing yards is his more or less. We also have a second prop for Mixon, 16.5 fantasy points, because he has kind of been getting into the end zone, even though he's had some poor performances yardage-wise the past few weeks. He's reached 61 yards in 9 of 18 games this season, but just one time since November. What do you think Mixon's going to do on Sunday?
Yeah, I think less. I think less than 60 rushing yards a game. Under 60 rushing yards in 6 of the past 7 games. Under 4 yards per carry in 7 straight games. They've been mixing in a little bit of Samaje Perine and Chris Evans here. I don't think they're effective. I think he could get a chance to get into the end zone here. But yes, I think in terms of the rushing yards, again, I just don't think he's going to be able to be that successful against Kansas City. I think Cincinnati's going to have to abandon their run game earlier than they want to.
All right. We got Tyreek Hill, 84.5 receiving yards. He's reached 85 yards in just 5 of 19 games, which just seems crazy for Tyreek Hill. But that's what happened this year. He did account for 50 yards last week against Buffalo, but Cincinnati held him to just 40 yards a month ago when they played. What do you think we're going to see out of Tyreek Hill?
Yeah, it's hard for me to take Patrick Mahomes more and then take less on Tyreek Hill, right? So if you're in here. 4 of the last 6 playoff games. Again, I'm going back to the playoffs here for Patrick Mahomes and Kansas City and their offense, Andy Reid. 4 of the last 6 playoff games for Tyreek Hill, he's had over 100 yards. So, one of the things about Tyreek Hill is he just needs one big play, right, to get a good chunk of that. I like his chances at this. I like how I think creatively they will use him a bunch of different ways. I actually would think that I think Tyreek Hill is very well aware that he was held to under 50 yards the last time he played Cincinnati. I'll say more than 84.5.
And crazy thing about that Cincinnati Chiefs game, the last time they played, they held Kelsey to 25 yards as well. His yardage total in this one, 75.5. He's reached 76 or more in 8 games this season. He's been over 90 in both playoff games. Should we expect that to continue as well?
Yeah, I like Travis Kelsey in this one. Cincinnati traditionally this year has struggled against elite tight ends. Think about what Darren Waller did to them in that playoff game. Even though the Raiders lost, Waller had a monster game here as well. In the playoffs over the last 3 seasons, Travis Kelsey is averaging 6.6 receptions in the playoffs. So that's more than the current line there on Monkey Knife Fight. So, yeah, I think I'm taking the over on all the Kelsey ones as well. Again, if you look at the numbers in terms of how they've done against sort of elite tight ends this year, the Bengals really struggle.
All right. And last guy I got for you here in this game, Jamar Chase, 89.5 receiving yards. He's reached 90 in 7 of 19 games, but he's been there in 4 of the last 5. The last time these two teams played, he erupted 11 catches, 266 yards, and 3 touchdowns. I think that's the single best fantasy performance individually of the year. You could correct me if I'm wrong there, but I'm expecting a big day out of Chase. I love the more here on this one.
I would agree with you as well. 100 or more yards in 4 of the past 5 games, including the playoffs. You mentioned the 266 week 17 against Kansas City, which, by the way, the best game in NFL history by a rookie wide receiver, the second best game in NFL history by a rookie, period, the 9th best fantasy day by a wide receiver in NFL history. Wow. Jamar Chase, and a top 15 fantasy day all time, any position, non-quarterback position, I should say, for Jamar Chase. So yes, just a monster game. He's had 2 playoff games. He's averaging 112 yards. Again, if I'm saying less on Joe Mixon rushing and I'm saying more on Joe Burrow passing, where's that coming from? Yes, we agree on Jamar Chase.
And then before we move on to the NFC Championship game, any other players in this one you have your eye on for DFS purposes?
I always think Byron Pringle gets overlooked. You know, he scored the touchdown last week, but I'm a Byron Pringle fan, Stan, and so I think in terms of DFS, I do think Byron Pringle and T. Higgins on the other side. Everyone looks at Tyreek Hill. Everyone looks at Jamar Chase. I just think those are guys that Higgins for the Bengals, obviously a much more modern name, but I like Byron Pringle, who runs a lot more routes than I think people realize.
All right. Moving on to the NFC Championship game, 49ers at the Rams. Kickoff for this one's probably going to be right around 6:40. Matt Stafford, 280.5 more or less passing for Stafford. He's reached 281 yards in 11 of 19 games. But the 2 games against San Francisco, he's been under 250 in both of them. Can that change this weekend?
Yeah, I don't think so. I'm going to say less. To your point. I mean, the number's 280. And he's been held to under 250 in both games against San Francisco. 49ers defense obviously playing great. Think about who the Niners have played this postseason. Aaron Rodgers and Dak Prescott. Like, it's not like they're out there against Taysom Hill or whatever, right? I mean, like, 2 prolific passers, 2 prolific offenses, Dak Prescott, Aaron Rodgers, they combined to average 239 passing yards versus the Niners this postseason. I'm going to say less than 280 here for Matthew Stafford.
I agree with you. And then we got Jimmy G, 225.5. He's thrown for 225 or more, 226 or more in 10 of 17 games, but he hasn't in either playoff game. He's kind of been in the sidecar. I thought that, I don't know if you follow the SNL host Introducing Musical Guests account on Twitter, but someone posted a clip of Drew Barrymore in the 90s introducing the very sexy garbage. It's like introducing Jimmy Garoppolo, which I thought was just the best tweet of the weekend.
Yeah.
So Jimmy G, 2 games against the Rams, 316 in one of them, 182 on the other. So he kind of just has to be right in the middle of that. What are we going to get out of Garoppolo?
I say less as well. So again, the San Francisco, the way they've won so far, it feels like, play good defense, don't turn the ball over, don't ask Garoppolo to do a lot, run the ball, whether it's with Elijah Mitchell or Deebo Samuel. Also, by the way, Jimmy Garoppolo, not 100% healthy. He's out there battling, credit to him, but I'm going to say less than this. Again, so far in this postseason, both wins, Garoppolo averaging 151 passing yards a game, 5 career playoff games with San Francisco. Jimmy G has only 1 game in those 5 career playoff games where he's been more than 175. I'm going to go less than 225 for Jimmy G.
Hasn't thrown a touchdown in the playoffs yet. Does that change this weekend?
Weirdly, I think that one does. That one does. I think it's a dump off to Deebo Samuel, who manages to run in. Yeah.
All right, let's talk about Deebo here. 53.5 receiving yards. He's reached 54 or more in 12 of 18 games, but he hasn't been there in either playoff game. He's kind of been more out of the backfield for the most part here as we've gone on in this season. So what do you like out of Deebo this weekend?
Let's see. So the line is what? Is the 53 receiving yards?
53.5.
53.5.
He reached 95 and 97 in the 2 games against the Rams.
Yeah, exactly. So I think given how much usage he gets, I'm going to say more than 53. Again, you mentioned them 90 yards. Like, I get it. He's been under 4. I mean, listen, I'm a little nervous. Under 45 receiving yards in both playoff games this year. But so far this season, Jalen Ramsey hasn't shadowed really. Mm-hmm. They kind of use him as a spy, and Kittle is somebody that they're really going to have to pay attention to. my expectation here is that they're going to move Debo around enough that he hits this number. This one's really close. This one's a really tough one. Candidly, I wouldn't play this one. This one is one that if I'm being honest, I probably wouldn't play this one. There's other ones that I feel a lot stronger about, but I'm on the show. I got to make a pick. I'll say more than 53.5.
All right, very good. And then last up, we'll do Cooper Kupp, 107.5 receiving yards for Kupp. He's reached 108 in 12 of 19 games this season. He hit that yardage marker in both games against San Francisco. I mean, the question with him is, can anyone slow him down? He scored in 4 straight games as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you followed me at all on Twitter, the podcast, I love my little Cooper Kupp. It's been a long running joke, so I'm definitely not saying less on my little Cooper Kupp. San Francisco plays. I expect them to play a lot of zone in this game, and that Cooper Kupp is really like a really good kind of zone beater. And so,
blitz.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I found out.
Yeah, exactly right. So, whereas I don't necessarily know, I expect a long touchdown the way that Kupp had against the Buccaneers last weekend. I will say that I think, as has been the case often this year, death by 1,000 cuts with Cooper Kupp. So, I mean, like, he's had in over half of his games this year, 53% of his games, including the playoffs, he's had 9 or more receptions. I mean, it's unbelievable. My expectation here is that if Sean McVay is going down, he's going down swinging, and he's going to get the ball into his best player's hand, and that's Cooper Kupp. So I'm going to say more. And
his reception number is 8.5. So you're going more on that as well?
I'm going more on that again. 9 or more receptions. Like I that's a big number. And that's one that I don't feel great about, to be honest, in terms of because 3 of the past 4 games, he's had 7 or fewer receptions. So that number is right there at 8.5. So that's probably one that I would avoid because I feel like that number is sort of right there. But I would say more on the receiving totals.
All right. Anybody else in this game you like?
Anyone else in this game I like? I will say I like the under, or less, I should say, on George Kittle. 54.5 receiving yards. All right. He's had under 30 yards in 4 of the past 5 games, including playoffs, 60 combined yards on 14 targets in the 2 games this year against the Rams. What people don't realize on George Kittle is he's an amazing blocker. He's a really, really good blocker. And so if you're trying to hide Jimmy Garoppolo, if you are trying to run the ball with its Deebo Samuel or Elijah Mitchell or whatever and control the clock, you're going to need George Kittle to stay in and block. And so it helps the Niners. Doesn't help his receiving totals.
All right, very good. Okay, before we let you go, Matthew, prediction time. Who's going to be playing for the Lombardi Trophy in LA in 2 weeks?
I'm going to say the Rams and the Chiefs.
All right.
I'm going to take the favorites.
Taking the favorites. Do they both cover? Got the Chiefs -7, Rams -3.5.
I think I do not think the Chiefs cover. I don't think either team covers. Actually, I think both teams. I think you have that reversed, right? I think the Chiefs are 7, and
Chiefs are
7.5. Rams are 3. I definitely think the Bengals make it closer than that. So I definitely think the Bengals cover. 49ers, that's a tough one there. I would bet the over, but I don't know that I would necessarily bet the line there. But you're asking me for prediction. I'm going with the favorites. Give me the Chiefs and Rams.
Yep.
We've had a lot of upsets. I think the favorites hold, but it'd be fun to see the Bengals in the Super Bowl. My prediction of who wins is whoever wins the AFC.
All right. Very good. I like that. Yeah. I'm going Chiefs Rams as well. I don't think either of the Bengals or the Niners are going to be able to just keep up at the very end. So I'm going with the 2 favorites as well. All right. Before we wrap things up, where can everybody follow you?
At Matthew Berry TMR on Twitter.
All right, great. Thanks, guys. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to MKF YouTube page here. We'll have more content coming out as the Super Bowl approaches, and subscribe to Matthew Berry's fantastic fantasy newsletter as well. Matthew, thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, fantasylife.com. Thank you, my friend. Good to see you, Dan.
All right, good to see you too. Thanks, guys.